Hello everyone, Gabe here, PC community developer here at Ubisoft, and today we're going to be diving into some Watch Dogs Legion PC goodness. The team has been hard at work building the game from the ground up, and you'll get your hands on that soon. But in this video we're going to give you a quick rundown of the PC features and what you can expect, all directly from the smart people over on the dev team. But that's enough of an introduction, let's get to it. From the start, the PC version of Watch Dogs Legion has been developed by the team in Kiev together with the lead studio in Toronto to make sure that we take into account all that goodness that comes with PC. One of the core principles for the team is to make sure that customization is taken to the next level. The idea of having the freedom to tweak and customize as much as possible to match your own preferences was crucial for them when building a great PC experience. In order to achieve that though, we have to talk about the engine that powers Watch Dogs Legion, Disrupt, and all the changes and improvements that have been made to it to bring you that best experience. These include things like better shader cache implementation based on your activities to provide you a smooth experience, support for real-time ray tracing, bring more realism and immersion to London with improved reflections, improved memory management for the creation and removal of geometry and textures, reworking the back end of DX12 to further improve stability, and much more. Needless to say, the team has been hard at work improving the engine to make sure that they have the tools to build you a great game. There are a few things in there that may have caught your attention, but let's start with DX12. The team decided to have both DX11 and DX12 available for you to pick from when it comes to rendering APIs. DX12 allows the team to take advantage of the latest and greatest technologies such as ray tracing, so you have all those jaw-dropping visuals, and asynchronous computing that gives the team the ability to further optimize performance. On top of that, DX12 also has native support for deferred context, which helps the CPU do more work in parallel, making sure that as much of your hardware is put to good use as possible. It was also important for the team to make sure that as many people get to experience Watch Dogs Legion as possible, which is why DX11 is also available. Now we all know how important performance is, and the engine and rendering API play an important role in that. To make sure that you can push your hardware to the limit and take full advantage of them, there is no FPS cap, so you can maximize your frames and live that high refresh rate monitor life. However, uncapped FPS is great and all, but to make sure that feels good, you also need smooth performance, which is something the team has worked hard on with all the engine improvements and optimizations they've put in. The goal is to give you something that runs great and looks fantastic. Plus, to make sure that you can find the perfect balance of that visual quality and performance, there's an in-game benchmark you can run as you tweak different settings. Speaking of settings, one of the best parts of playing on PC is jumping into all those settings and spending some absurd amount of time tweaking all them before even getting into the game. As we mentioned before, taking customization to the next level is one of the core principles for the PC version of Watch Dogs Legion. That means you're getting a huge variety of visual and graphical settings to tweak to your liking, as well as support for different multi-monitor setups and aspect ratios. Beyond the visual settings, there's also something that might be a bit important when it comes to having a comfortable experience, and that's of course your controls. They're super important for giving you that personal experience, and that's why the team has invested a lot of time into iterating them to make sure that the mouse and keyboard controls feel good, and that you have the tools you need to fully make them your own. So if for some reason you want to use something other than WASD for your movement keys, you can. Another thing that may have caught your attention before is real-time ray tracing. We've been working closely with NVIDIA to implement RTX so that you can take your visual experience to the next level. That's not all though, DLSS 2.0 will also be available, which is a huge help when it comes to performance at higher resolution. You can check out the interview we did with the NVIDIA team just over a year ago at Gamescom, as well as some of their juicy videos linked in the description below. The team has also been working closely with Tobii to implement their eye tracking technology, as well as MSI for their Mystic Light and voice command features. Both those we'll hopefully dive into more in a future video. So with all that information, what does it look like when we transfer it into some hardware requirements? Luckily we have some PC specs, so let's take a look at them. Starting it off with 1080p low settings. On the CPU side, you'll need an Intel Core i5-4460 or an AMD Ryzen 5 1400. For the graphics card, you're looking at an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 960 or an AMD Radeon R9 290X. You'll need 4 gigs of VRAM, 8 gigs of RAM, and 45 gigs of storage space. For operating system, and this applies to all the specs, you'll need Windows 10. After that we have 1080p at high settings. For CPU, you'll need an Intel Core i7-4790 or an AMD Ryzen 5 1600. For GPU, you'll want an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060 or an AMD Radeon RX 480. You'll need 6 gigs of VRAM, 8 gigs of RAM in a dual channel setup and 45 gigs of storage space. Next up, we have 1440p at high settings. For CPU, you're looking at an Intel Core i7-7700K or an AMD Ryzen 5 2600. On the graphics card side, you'll need an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2060 Super or an AMD Radeon RX 5700. You'll need 8 gigs of VRAM, 16 gigs of RAM in a dual channel setup, and 45 gigs of storage space. And now over to 4K at ultra settings. On the CPU side, you'll need an Intel Core i7-9700K or an AMD Ryzen 7 3700X. For the GPU, you'll need an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2080 Ti or an AMD Radeon 7. For VRAM, you'll need 11 GB, and for RAM, you'll need 16 GB in that same dual channel setup. Storage space wise, you're looking at 45 gigs plus 20 gigs for the HD texture packs. And now moving over to the ray tracing settings, where we have 1080p at high settings. On the CPU side, you'll need an Intel Core i5-9600K or an AMD Ryzen 5 3600. For the graphics card, you're looking at an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2070. You'll need 8 gigs of VRAM, 16 gigs of RAM in the dual channel setup, and 45 gigs of storage space. And finally, for the 4K at ultra settings using ray tracing, on the CPU side you have an Intel Core i7-9700K or an AMD Ryzen 7 3700X. For the graphics card, you'll need an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2080 Ti. You'll need to be running 11 gigs of VRAM and the same 16 gigs of RAM with dual channel setup. For storage space, you'll need 45 gigs plus that extra 20 gigs for the HD texture pack. And that about wraps it up. We hope that gives you a good rundown of what you can expect from the PC version of Watch Dogs Legion. Make sure you follow the Watch Dogs Legion team over on all their channels, which you'll find linked in the description below. And keep an eye on this channel, because we might have some cool things coming up. But as always, if you have any questions or feedback, please leave them in the comment section below. And until next time, see ya.